People often ask me, what's the difference between assertive and aggressive communication? So if you are someone who wants to achieve your goals in your communication and get good outcomes for yourself or your boss or your client, but you don't want to ruin your reputation or be seen as a jerk, this video is for you. Many times people think there's a trade-off between building a relationship or being likable and being successful in negotiation. But truth is, that's just not true, because the best negotiators get what they want by being assertive and not aggressive, by being rigorous on a problem, but not on the people. In this video, I'm going to share with you the difference between aggressive and assertive communication, and I'll offer you 4 tips on how you could be effectively assertive, get great outcomes, and build a great reputation for yourself. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm a senior fellow. I'm the founder and the former director of Harvard Law School's Negotiation Mediation Clinical Program, and I'm the founder and principal of the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. So, at first, being aggressive and being assertive might sound similar to you, but there is a big difference between the two. So, what is aggression? It usually involves behaviors that are strident or belligerent or obstinate, so that involve force in a way that can really damage a relationship and give you a really bad reputation. Now, sometimes aggressive behavior might get you your substantive goal, but in the long run, kind of backfires.
We tried and we failed.
So lots of examples of aggressive negotiation behavior include tactics like shouting, bullying, banging on a table, threats, name-calling, not listening, or personal insults. So at times, these behaviors get us what we want in the short term. In the long run, they're pretty inadvisable.
Let's not do it.
Let me give you an example about someone, and I'm going to protect the innocent, just say in academia, who had been recruited from one highly competitive school to another highly competitive school. The school that was recruiting him desperately needed this person because their senior person in the field had retired, and they had lost some really big name faculty members to their competition. So the leverage in this case was very much in favor of the person being recruited. This person decided to use a whole bunch of highly aggressive tactics to get all sorts of things they wanted. Really high pay, really light teaching loads, lots of leave semesters, etc. On the surface, it looked like a win. But here's the truth of the matter. Everyone at that institution, all the other faculty administrators, knew of this story of aggressive behavior. And as this new person came to their new home institution, they had to dig out of a hole of bad feeling that lasted for many years. So on the one hand, the aggressive behavior looked successful. On the other hand, probably backfired. So let's talk about effective assertion then, because effective assertion describes a set of behaviors that demonstrate confidence in one's interests, concerns, and needs, and also seriousness of purpose in achieving them. But being assertive is being firm on the issues, but not being bellicose or hostile or rude or exhibiting in-your-face behavior.
Them don't be rude.
Effective assertion usually enhances your reputation in negotiation and in communication. Let me tell you a story about a potential client from some years ago. So after I'd spoken with them, I told them what my rate was, and they came back and said,
"Can you do any better?"
And I politely but firmly told them, I'm really sorry, but then I inquired as to their constraints. And this was actually a client that came from a pretty big institution that had a fair amount of resources. It's just that they had only decided to devote a certain amount of money to this particular project. And after I asked some questions, I said, I totally understand that this is kind of where you're at in terms of what you've put into this and what your boss has given you authority for, and that's just lower than my rate. I'd love the chance to work with you. You should know I often do pro bono work or even low bono work, but really that's for clients that don't have the kind of pockets that your institution has.
I am broke. Don't you guys understand?
So fast forward a few months later, I get a call from this potential client, and they said, yeah, so we'd really love to have you come work with us. I said, great, what changed? And they said, listen, after the way you handled that, I hung up the phone and said, I have to get authority from my client, from my boss, to work with you on this. So for me, this is an example of effective assertion. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I tried to explain why I was saying no.
And he said no.
And in some sense, right, handling this well actually increased my credibility with this potential client, so much so that they were motivated to work harder to bring me on board. Let me share the 4 key ways to be effectively assertive without being aggressive. First, speak to their interests before you assert. Now, this might seem counterintuitive, but asking them about what's important to them, what their concerns are, actually allows you to frame your points in ways that are appealing or resonant for them. So you gain critical information that helps you understand what's the best way to be assertive in a way that will land well with them. Second, when you're asserting, span the ladder of inference. So as you can see from this tool, at the top of the ladder are conclusions. And when people are asserting in negotiation, that's usually what they're saying. They're saying things like, you are irresponsible, or I need X, Y, and Z, or you did a terrible job. That conclusion, which is, again, as you can see at the top of the ladder, is actually drawn from an ocean of observable data in the universe. And because we're human beings, it's really impossible to observe and notice everything going on in a situation at the same time, because it's actually an ocean of information. So we actually choose pieces of data that support our viewpoint in some way, or that are interesting to us in some way. And then we filter that data through a reasoning process based on the way we were raised, the story we tell about ourselves and the world, and then we reach a conclusion. So when we say span the ladder of inference, what we mean in terms of being effective is sharing what your conclusion is, but also what is the specific data you noticed, and what is the meaning or reasoning you put on that. So for example, if I'm in a conversation with my friend Toby, who is a lifelong Bostonian, and I say to him something like, I think the New York Yankees are the most amazing baseball team ever, because I'm actually originally from the New York City area, he might counter and say, well, I think the Red Sox are the best baseball team ever. What we're both doing there is looking at conclusions. If I want to span the ladder of inference, what I need to say is, the reason why I say that is the New York Yankees have the most World Series championships of any baseball team. That's the data I've chosen. And the way I assess what is a successful baseball team is based on the number of world championships you have. My friend Toby might respond and say, well, that's helpful, but actually the way I assess a baseball team is how they're doing in the past 15 years. And if you look at recent history, actually since 2004, the Red Sox have done much better than the New York Yankees to world championships and getting into the playoffs. Now, you might be thinking, well, neither of you have persuaded the other, and that's true. But when we span the ladder of inference, sharing our conclusion, the data, and the reasoning, it's a much more productive conversation. Even if I don't persuade you, it gives us a place that we can move forward with shared problem solving. Third piece of advice, globalizations. So what do I mean by that? A sure way to get a defensive response in a negotiation is to say something like, you never, let's say, do the dishes, or you are always late. Words like always and never tend to be triggers for the other side. It's not an effective way to assert. Because if you say something to me like, you never cook me dinner, you could be darn sure well that I'm going to reference the time in the 9th when there was a full moon when I made you dinner. So it is much more effective to speak from your own experience, but avoid using always or never when you're asserting. Fourth, and importantly, speak from your own perspective. Effective assertion and negotiation means speaking from your own perspective as opposed to either framing an experience as an objective fact or as on behalf of someone else other than. I was working on a group project for a nonprofit client. And after each meeting with the client, our team would meet to share our impressions. One of my colleagues, let's just call him Jake here, would always begin by saying,
well, what's really interesting here is...
And then he would share something he observed. Now, sometimes I thought my colleague made a good point, and other times not so much. But this is less about whether I thought he made a good point or not. Because here's what I thought almost one thing you found interesting, but actually there's a bunch of other things that I found interesting, and I suspect there are lots of other things our colleague noticed that neither of us did that they found interesting. What's so interesting is that as this 6-month project wore on, I found myself starting to actually discount Jake's observations of what was, quote, really interesting. And this is the important point here. I wasn't the only one who was doing that. Others on our team started to discount this colleague's comments as well. And by the end of the project, you could practically see others' eyes roll when our colleague would declare, What's really interesting here is, problem is not that people thought Jake's comments were wrong or silly. It's just the way he made the assertion was an irritator. It made him look arrogant, self-assured, and aggressive in a way that frankly pissed off other people.
What is your problem?
It would have been much more effective if he said, from my perspective, what was interesting here was, or in my view, what I noticed was, or from my experience, what I found interesting was. Any of these would have landed in an entirely different way. One of the biggest mistakes people make in negotiation is confusing aggression with assertion. Because they don't want to be seen as difficult, unfriendly, or rude, or obtuse, they end up agreeing to terms that keep them from getting all they can get. But the choice between doing well for yourself and building a positive, trusting relationship is honestly a false one. By mastering these four tools for being effectively assertive, that is, speaking to their interests first, using the ladder of inference, avoiding globalizations, and speaking from your perspective, you'll find you could be a really effective negotiator who yields outsized influence with your colleagues, all while being likable and building a great relationship. I have another video that will help you. It's called How to Control Your Emotions in a Difficult Negotiation. So if you want to learn more about how to improve your assertion skills in negotiation, consider taking a course or signing up for one-on-one coaching at the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. Or just keep watching these videos here. You know you want to do it, so ring the bell, like, and subscribe. Thanks for hanging out, and let's keep negotiating together. Click this video because you know we all need help negotiating.